Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting edition of Knights of the Dirty Table. I am your host, legally blind Merrick Henry, and today we wanted to shoot a very quick video that talks about the recent fallout of Spider-Man from the MCU in regards to Disney and Sony not being able to come together on a deal to keep the Spider-Man character in the same universe as Iron Man and Captain America and Captain Marvel and the rest of the Avengers films that have taken place in the last 10 years. As a side note, we do have future episodes of Knights of the Dirty Table coming out. We have a back catalog of episodes that we've shot very recently, and we are working on those as we speak, so stay tuned for those. But today we wanted to shoot something very quick. As of this video, the D23 Expo, the Disney Expo, just took place this past weekend, and we wanted to wait to really talk about this deal because we wanted to gather as much information as we could and kind of get all of the facts that were publicly available to us to figure out kind of what happened. And I want to start with this. I don't understand why so many people have taken such drastic sides in the matter. I mean, obviously, I think we all can agree we wanted to keep Spider-Man in the MCU because it's been great seeing him with all the Avengers. But there are many people who are so pro-Disney where they feel like anything Sony does just falls apart. Any film that they make is just absolutely terrible. And they shot themselves in the foot by having this deal fall apart. They were just greedy and looking for more money. And then you have the pro-Sony people who feel that everything Disney does is way too corporate. It's too factory made. And everything that they're doing, it's just too much of the same. It's too similar. And they're just greedy and looking to get more money than they deserve, I guess. And I wanted to kind of break down both sides in a way. I certainly, in my opinion, would have rather kept Spider-Man in the MCU, but I would like to take sides between the two and kind of help us all figure out where the good is and the bad is in this whole deal. And, wrong slide. There we go. So just to keep going with dispelling the truth here, Tom Holland will still be Spider-Man regardless of all of this. I don't know where this meme came from that Tom Holland is not going to be Spider-Man. They're going to reboot Spider-Man for the fourth time in the last 20 years. And that's not true. Tom Holland is still signed on to be Spider-Man. He's gone on to state that he is excited to continue the journey of Peter Parker even without the help of Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios. So don't believe that out there for those that are. It's not true. Tom Holland is still your Spider-Man. The only difference is that now in Spider-Man films going forward, there are no more crossover characters. And by those, I mean characters crossing over from Disney and the MCU into a Sony film. Because Spider-Man is technically a Sony film because they're the ones that made the deal, blah, blah, blah. You already know what it is. So no more Iron Man, no more Nick Fury. Any references made to previous Avengers films, such as Endgame, such as Infinity War, they're just not going to mention them moving forward. It's just going to be everything that's happened within Homecoming and Far From Home. And if you saw the mid-credits scene in Far From Home, I won't give that away in case you haven't seen it, especially since they're going to be re-releasing it in theaters, so you have another chance to go see it with like 4 minutes of extra footage, I think, something along those lines, very similar to Endgame. You'll know that the story will continue in the third film. It just won't have anything Avengers related. Now, I would like to speak directly to the pro-Disney fans for a moment, those that are heavily against what, Sony's doing. Disney fans, you're saying this is the worst mistake ever. Sony doesn't deserve this character. They haven't gotten it right at all. They haven't gotten it right in like 7 years, which is kind of true. But it's not completely Sony's fault here that Marvel went bankrupt in the 90s and Marvel needed to sell off their characters' film rights as a way to jumpstart the company to get themselves going. To counter that, though, it is Sony's fault that they didn't have the opportunity to buy the entire Marvel catalog outright. In the 90s, Sony had an opportunity to buy the film rights to every single Marvel character out there, and they would have had control of the entire roster. They would have made the Avengers movies. They would have made the Black Panther movie. They would have made everything. But they felt that Spider-Man was the only character worthwhile. There's a direct quote on there. I won't go into that, but they had an opportunity. They passed it up. So that is their fault, but it's not their fault that Marvel needed to sell off characters. So they bought Spider-Man. It's not Sony's fault that they weren't sure if the deal was even going to work back when this was coming together in 2015-ish, I'd say. There's no way of knowing how this was going to work. They had just come off Amazing Spider-Man 2, and while it was somewhat of a success, it was not the numbers that they wanted, so they were prepared to just start from scratch and not continue and move forward with a different iteration. They reached out to Marvel Studios. They're the ones that put the deal together. This wasn't Disney reaching in, trying to see if they could make something work. It started with Sony. And when you start with the tracing of the film timeline for Spider-Man, for Tom Holland's Spider-Man, Spider-Man's coming into Civil War. And it was great that he was able to be a part of this movie, but the bottom line of Captain America Civil War was this was a Captain America film. This was an Iron Man film. This was borderline an Avengers film altogether, and it helped introduce Black Panther. So there were a lot of different pieces that helped make that film successful. Even if you take out Spider-Man, I think the film still would have made $1 billion, but adding in Spider-Man only helped keep it more closer to the comic book source material and made fans really happy. And it was a great way to introduce a new Spider-Man just 2 years after having a completely different one in a completely separate universe. You're tracing from Civil War to Homecoming, where, again, it's still a few short years after old Spider-Man had taken on the mantle. You have a new one. The numbers were great, but it wasn't quite as huge outside of the U.S. because people were kind of in a Spider-Man fatigue. You weren't really going to have an idea of how the Spider-Man deal would work until later. Sony did commission a sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming after the first trailer dropped and after the wonderful reviews of that. So regardless of what the money was going to be, we were going to get a sequel either way, because it was important to have Spider-Man in the other Avengers films leading up to a sequel to see how that would pay off. That was kind of Sony's endgame in a way, to see how the sequel would work, regardless of how the first movie did. Thanks to Spider-Man being in Infinity War and Tom Holland giving a remarkable scene at the end of the film, obviously when he blipped away, that's the official term now, and then coming back in Endgame and even having a substantial role in the final battle and getting a decent amount of dialogue. Those appearances only helped his Far From Home film and helped make it reach $1 billion. That's the payoff there. The whole point of the deal was to get the sequel to be financially sturdy enough so that Sony could start to really see what they can do with the character. They also felt that after seeing the Marvel Studios process, they saw it firsthand for 2 films. When Homecoming was coming out, they were already in the process of shooting Venom. And they hadn't really kind of seen the fruits of their labor, if you will. So yeah, Venom was a bit of a mess. We'll have a separate video talking about my views on Venom in the future as we get closer to a sequel. But Venom wasn't great, but it wasn't awful either. And they weren't able to really take what they learned from the process, the Marvel Studios process, and put it into that film. They also, in the past few months, they came out with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a whole separate entity, an animated Spider-Man, a different Spider-Man altogether. So after having these 2 successful films, Venom being a commercial hit, not necessarily critical, but a commercial hit, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse being a critical hit, and while not exactly making a ton of money, it won an Oscar, so it's going to play on TV forever. So Sony's going to make a ton of money just on TV rights, just to play it on TV. These 2 films, Sony kind of has a legitimate say in, we're going to pull back on this deal. You know, we don't want to give Disney everything because we've clearly proven that we can take these spider characters and make something out of them commercially and critically successful, especially after being involved in 2 films and seeing the Marvel process work from beginning to end twice. So it makes sense why Sony would not be as up for the deal. And then lastly, I would ask you, for the Disney fans, please do not boycott the upcoming Spider-Man 3 film with Tom Holland. Obviously, you can do what you want, but I feel like it would be a disservice to what Tom Holland has done with the character. It would be a disservice to Sony having the chance to tell a great story, especially after learning the process from the 2 films. I feel personally that people can learn and they can adapt and they can grow to be better. And I would say the same thing for this studio. Why can't they have the opportunity to make a better Spider-Man film? They've seen the audience reaction. They've seen the whole process firsthand. Why not give them a chance, especially with Tom Holland in the wheel? If it was a different Spider-Man, then maybe that's something, but I think we should give at least Tom Holland the benefit of the doubt about making a good Spider-Man movie. So I'd please ask, don't boycott the film. It's not going to do any good. People are still going to see it either way, so you might as well just enjoy it for the ride that it is as well. Now, I would like to talk to the Sony fans, the people that are incredibly anti-Disney in this matter. Disney is too evil and it's too corporate. It's too much like a factory. They want to own everything all across the world, especially after the 20th Century Fox buyout that they had. Now, Far From Home was a very successful film. It's Sony's biggest film ever. Bigger than Skyfall, bigger than the Men in Black films. You could go down the franchise list for whatever Sony has, but it's their biggest film ever. But Sony can't really deserve all the credit on it. Sony outsourced to Marvel Studios, a Disney company, and these people, the Marvel Studios people, are the ones that made this movie successful. I understand that you want to take the process and be able to have all the money go to you and be able to make a complete product out of it. But you got to give credit where credit is due. Kevin Feige and his team are the ones that really helped save the Spider-Man brand. Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, those films fell apart for a reason because they were treated like action movies, not really comic book written stories. There's a reason why they fell apart. You had the right team put it together. It kind of feels a little weird to just jump out of that, especially when the iron's still hot. I mean, you just had all of these Marvel movies, Black Panther, Spider-Man 2, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, becoming the biggest movie of all time. Yay, Captain Marvel. All these films have just made $1 billion. Why would you want to step away from that and take the risks yourself? I know you have other Spider characters in your pool, but why wouldn't you want to keep going with the magic of what Marvel Studios is doing? Supposedly the deal, as a side note, it was that Marvel Studios wanted to hand in all of the Sony characters as well. There's rumors that it was either a 50-50 split down the middle for co-financing, so there'd be 50-50 profit, or it'd be 70-30 in Sony's favor. So I don't want to necessarily give a stated fact as to what it is because we're still figuring out what that is. But the bottom line is Sony didn't want to give up the control. They didn't want to give up the deal that they had. They still wanted to give the 5% on day one of sales for Marvel Studios from the ticket sales, and then Sony would just keep the rest of the box office. Coming back to that, I don't understand why Sony would want to just back away from that while the iron's hot. So I feel like it's their loss. And yeah, Spider-Man 3 fell apart, and ultimately what wouldn't be Spider-Man 4. The writing, there's a way that films feel in the 2000s, action films, they feel very actiony. There isn't really an emphasis on character development. There isn't really an emphasis on being completely accurate. Some characters were more than others, but it feels very pale. The portrayals feel pale in comparison to what we have now. Where the MCU, you have essentially comic book writing taking place, stories that are carrying over from one film, one book, if you will, to the next, and everything's carrying over, and everything feels fleshed out and vibrant, and you have all these characters that you know who they are every time they enter into another film. There's no question of who they are. Every director who directs a character, say John Watts directing the Spider-Man films, he was on set for Civil War to learn how they're taking the character and how he can make the transition seamless from the Captain America franchise into the Spider-Man franchise. Doesn't that just make sense? There's a sense of care that's taking place with these characters that didn't quite happen between 2007 and 2014 with these three films. So to my Sony fans out there, you got to know that Disney's doing it right for a reason. And I understand the notion that, Disney's trying to take over the world and they're trying to outright buy everything, and they are, but isn't every company trying to do that? Everyone's trying to take out the competition and outsource the market. I mean, they just announced, fully in detail Disney Plus at the D23 Expo. It's just part of corporate nature. To conclude, I'm going to enjoy the deal for what it was. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which we never thought would happen. We got Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How amazing is that? We never thought that was going to happen. I say it's not the worst thing for another studio to hold on to a Marvel character, to keep the ideas fresh, and to be able to tell their own unique stories with their own resources and their own interpretations. I've always felt that Spider-Man, this was before the deal took place, I've always felt that Spider-Man is the one Marvel character that could get away with not being in the Avengers universe, with being able to tell his own stories. Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery is probably the most famous out of the Rogues Gallery of any other Marvel character. It's certainly, Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery is up here with Batman's Rogues Gallery, in my view. He's the only one that could get away with it, and I was okay with having Spider-Man be his own separate thing. You can't have, Iron Man not participating with the Avengers' Rogues Gallery. I don't see it happening after 3 films. You'd really be reaching by the end. Certainly Captain America, same thing. You're going to have villains, but they're not going to be as A-list as Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Venom, Mysterio, Shocker. As dumb as he is, he's still pretty colorful and people still kind of know him. But to counter that, the success of what we've gotten has been undeniable. It's going to be really sad to not have Tom Holland in the MCU really anymore. It will be interesting if they were able to make Tom Holland part of the Venom franchise in some way. Wouldn't it be great to get Tom Holland and Tom Hardy going up against Woody Harrelson's Carnage in a Venom sequel? Wouldn't that be fantastic? And it would certainly help Venom 2 get out of probably the critical bombardment that it took when it first came out. But it'll be sad that we no longer have some of this wonderful magic that we've gotten for the last few years. Seeing Tom Holland interact with Robert Downey Jr. in his Iron Man portrayal. We're going to miss that, but I'm just thankful that we got it at all, because no one ever thought it was going to happen. Even Kevin Feige had no clue it was going to happen. And that's my piece. Thanks so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked this episode, make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure to like our Facebook page and share with all your friends. Thanks so much, and we will see you later.